Well, what a great day it is here to be in New York Harbor. Well, almost in it, but we have the Statue of Liberty behind us. Through this port, every year about $1 trillion worth of commerce go through here, all under the oversight of Sector New York. And joining me today is Lieutenant Yvonne Yang, assigned to Sector New York. So, Yvonne, welcome to our leadership series, and tell me a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Admiral. I grew up in Queens, New York, and I graduated from the Coast Guard Academy in 2006, was assigned to the Coast Guard cutter Acushnet out of Ketchikan, Alaska, as a deck watch officer, and then went to the Maritime Law Enforcement Academy in Charleston, South Carolina for 3 years, and did a temporary separation from 2011 to 2013. I've been stationed here at Sector New York since 2013 as the Operations Planning Chief.
And I should add that temporary separation was not the typical temporary separation. It took you places like South Africa, Patagonia, Indonesia, traversing by foot in the four corners of the world, and we're glad to have you back again. So when we talk about leadership and my 4 leadership principles, the final one is taking decisive action. So in your role as Lieutenant Yang, what does taking decisive action mean to you?
To me, taking decisive action means doing what you should do, when you should do it, whether or not you feel like it. And in Sector New York, there are so many things that happen on a daily basis. And my job as the Operations Planning Chief is to plan for upcoming known events that we have. Things like Fleet Week, Macy's 4th of July, the UN General Assembly, papal visits, POTUS visits, and those are just the things that we know are coming up, which is a huge planning operation with all of our different port agencies. So we spend months planning for these events, and we, when it comes for those actual events, things usually happen that are totally out of our control that we don't see, but we, due to our planning and our training and our partnerships that we have, we're able to take decisive action to adapt to those events and succeed in providing the best mission and meeting the mission of the port. One of my favorite quotes is from Dwight Eisenhower, and he said, when it comes for the time of battle, plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. And I feel that that perfectly sums up my job and also the port of New York, because things happen so quickly that a lot of times we're just looking to make sure that next thing doesn't happen before,
Funny, because I have that same quote on an index card on my desk by Dwight Eisenhower. But yes, at the end of the day, planning is indeed everything. If you were to think of all the decisive actions that you've taken, whether it was here at Sector New York, or maybe it was in Ketchikan, or maybe it was in Patagonia, is there any one critical moment that you can think of where your taking decisive action really mattered?
Definitely on a cutter as a deck watch officer. I believe taking decisive action is one of the leadership philosophies that you can apply on a daily basis, for rules of the road situations, or for search and rescue cases that you encounter out there. Here in New York, it was during the UN General Assembly, and the president of Iraq decided that he wanted to take a cruise on an 87-foot patrol boat by the Statue of Liberty. And it's a simple request seemingly, but to make everything happen while we already had all those plans and operations ongoing was a huge success. And it was a lot of complex last-minute work of calling people, making sure that the right assets and the right people were in the right place at the right time, but it happened seemingly seamlessly. And it was one of those events that you just can't predict. But looking back, you're like, wow, can't believe that happened and that we were able to make it work. So.
The president of Iraq, you said?
Yes, sir.
So we have a lot of our folks in Iraq. When I say our folks, all the armed services. So diplomacy is everything. So
it is.
What a great
Absolutely.
story that is.
Especially in New York. You don't see it in many other places in action as in New York City.
So if you think of all the examples of leadership that you've seen, and you are indeed a leader, is there any moment in your career that you look back upon in leadership, and maybe it's your elevator speech of what it means to be a leader? Is there any vignette scenario that comes to mind?
To me, one of the most important things about being a great leader, and this, isn't a typical response, but it's learning to have difficult conversations.
Oh.
And the most difficult conversation I ever had to have was I was assigned as the Casualty Assistance Calls Officer for a family. An MK3 had committed suicide, and I had to notify their family of his death. And that challenged me as a person, as an officer, more than any other scenario or situation I've ever had to deal with. And I learned that from having these difficult conversations, there's so many platforms where you have to have difficult conversations, and a lot of times that ties into taking decisive action, doing the right thing when it's not necessarily what you personally want to do. It has so many impacts that you won't know the far reaches of that difficult conversation, but so many times they're absolutely necessary to have. And I think that's something that it's an art that you need to learn and have a lot of experience with. But it's one of those traits of a leader that I see. They are able to take scenarios that are not necessarily pleasant, not the best ones that everyone wants to have, but that's where you are tested as a person. Is in those challenges of having difficult conversations with whether it's superiors or subordinates or your peers. So.
Yeah, whether it's taking those tough calls or, in your case, making those tough calls, those are really defining moments in leadership. And I'm sure that MK3's family looks back, and you were the first face of the Coast Guard, the first voice of the Coast Guard to reach out to them. And I'm sure that left an indelible image with them as well. I'm proud to have you on my leadership team. Proud of the fact that we will soon have you working out in our 17th Coast Guard District. Quite honestly, probably our most unforgiving environment, where we have Coast Guard men and women serving today. So as we leave this gorgeous day here in New York Harbor and you make your way to the 17th Coast Guard District, I wish you continued success in your journey as a leader in the Coast Guard. Thank you so much, Yvonne.
Thank you,
It's great to have
Admiral.
you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, thanks.